This is a brief follow-up on last week's talking about building background, since what I'm going to present you with in this class this week is some scenarios, and you can choose. I'm probably going to take 2 out of 4, and you write quite a bit on each one. But what I'm going to be looking for is your ability to think how you can adapt your particular topic in your grade level to something that the students will be familiar with. So you're going to have a little bit of discussion and then kind of give a paragraph of what kind of lesson, how you might set it up. For example, let's say you had, let's say you're teaching a math class to a certain grade, and I won't have a scenario listed. It has to be a certain grade. But if you're teaching a math class to a group of kids, and you know several of them are from different parts of the world, maybe you got an Egyptian kid and several from Central America, South America, and maybe you have a few from Europe or refugees and a couple of from China, is that you've got this group, and you may even have with it, you can assume this, you may even have remedial students in there. A lot of times schools will put remedial kids in with ESL kids because it's a content class and they're trying to be as efficient as they can. It's probably not ideal, but you know, it's probably all right in the sense that kids get access to native speakers of English as in their class. And then how will you design to take advantage of that? Will you have them do some group work? Will you have them work together on a project? So I'm not talking about you just constructing a lecture, but maybe having some assignment where they can blend together, they can work in small groups, maybe mixed groups where the better English speaker is working with a kid that doesn't speak very much, but they can still communicate and they get practice on the BICS, okay? Basic interpersonal communication skills. You always want to be working on all aspects of English, not just academic and academic classroom. So let's say it's a math class and you want, maybe you want to design something where it's a Mayan pyramid or an Egyptian pyramid, and your requirement is that kids will find the volume of the pyramid given the base and the size of it. Now, I'm not doing the equations here, I'm just talking. But solid objects can be, you can determine the volume of them, you know, how many square meters, cubic for volume for a solid object, or cubic millimeters if it's tiny. And so how would they go about doing the lesson? How would they go about solving the problem? And you know, if they have a Mayan, or what would be called in Egypt a step pyramid, you would just have a solid set of blocks on the bottom, another set of blocks forming basically kind of a square or rectangle on top of it. So you could go through and analyze those stage by stage or story by story. It's almost like a multi-story building. And then when you get to the top, maybe you've got one square up there, but you could have different type pyramids in there. And then the students could go through and figure it out, that they could break it down in pieces and do it. Or if they have the Egyptian pyramid, which is straight, you know, square, it's not a triangle on the bottom. It's kind of comes to a triangle on the top, but it's 4 squares, 4 sides, and they all come up to a point. And how would the students figure out the volume of the pyramid? All right, now I'm not going to do the math and figure out how to teach that. That's up to you if you choose that. I'm assuming you know math well enough to do a little research on the volume of pyramids. But do a little problem solving, set it up so the students have an objective, they have a project, they have to do something. This is just one example of a lesson scenario. You could do math with the same group and maybe have them work together to come up with a solution to equations, or have certain ones do the drawing if there's a drawing involved. So I'm giving you a lot of leeway on this. I just want you to, now what we're doing is we're playing. I want you to play with these scenarios, which you can come up with. So don't feel bad if somebody comes up with a better scenario. But I want you to spend the time trying to come up with some ideas. I will give you 4 scenarios and you can work with them. One of them will be in social science, one may be in reading something, one will be in math, maybe one will be in science, or you can, and if you want to change the topic a little bit or move it around, you can reconfigure it. I'm just giving you some raw clay here to work with. But I want to see how you would do reading, writing, speaking, and listening, how you would have all of those included, but mainly have focus on the content of how they would work together in a group. So I'll give you a little definition or a little example of what kind of group you're working with very loosely, and then mainly be ELs, English learners, but there may be a few people that aren't English learners. There's no reason if it's content class, who knows who else you might have in there. But the idea is to think about it, just play games with it, as I've just mentioned. If you had a class on one of the examples I've given is the Oregon Trail. How would you get the idea of a trail in Oregon, which really isn't in Nebraska? When you talk about the Oregon Trail, I would think a kid might look and say, wait, Oregon's out there. Why is this a trail? And you may have to explain some of that to the kids so they understand this is a road going from Omaha or Kansas City to Oregon, and it goes through Nebraska. So you could do all kinds of things with that. Math, you could do how much stuff they have to put on the wagon, and they have to figure out or you could do one where they have so much money and they have to figure out how much stuff they can afford to buy and the prices. I'm not going to give you all that information. You can give a general idea of how you might do the lesson. We're just doing a kind of a proto lesson. We're kind of putting it in its first stage just to play. We're just playing here, okay? So, and I would like you to comment on 4 of those, or you can comment on more. So that's what the scenario is going to be. And then I want you to establish in there, of course, what is it from this group that you could say that I'm either going to provide the background to help them understand, or I may actually know something about their historic background. Maybe if they're kids from Central America and they've traveled by foot or by however, they wouldn't have gone by Conestoga wagon. But the idea of travel over rough territory and dealing with mountains and dealing with rivers and dealing with the dangers along the way, that is not so unlike the Oregon Trail, the people on the Oregon Trail. So that's a social studies historical version. You can change the setting if you want. You can change the time period. You could do World War I. You could do one on economics on trade. You are free to alter these scenarios to come up with a good and interesting lesson. And what the purpose of this is write basically a paragraph about how you make connections, and then a paragraph for how you do the lesson. And then the same for the second one. So you're doing 4 paragraphs. I'm putting 25 points on this because this is extra work. But it's just, I just want you to, look in chapter 3 that deals with building background, and then look at, how you might go about creating this lesson. All right. I don't want to beat it to death, but I think you get the idea. So always think of, you could refer to the culture maps. Remember we did the culture maps. They draw a map of where they're from, and that gives you ideas about the kids. I think the culture maps ought to be in their files somewhere electronically. So it gives you a visual of what's important to them in their lives or where their background's from. You can change the culture maps and have them do another if you want them to talk about where their ancestors came from. Where did they come from? Guatemala? Did they come from Central Russia? did they, were they refugees in Libya, and then they went to Italy, and a few of them got to go Syrians or something. Maybe they ended up in the United States. So you have total freedom to play around with this in the discussion. All right. And if you have any questions, you can email me anytime, and I usually get back to you within an hour or two, unless it's after 4 in the morning or before 11. Then I don't get right back to you because I sleep weird hours, and those are the hours. Okay. So have fun with it, and let's play with making lessons.